Let me ask you something. Have you ever stared up at the night sky and felt chosen? Not in an arrogant way, not in a fantasy way, but in that quiet, unsettling way where you feel like you're not supposed to be here, and yet here you are, breathing, thinking, aware. Most people feel this at some point, they just never admit it. Because we were taught something else. We were told the universe is random, a cosmic accident, a blind explosion of particles drifting through indifferent space. But here's what almost nobody tells you. The odds of you existing are 1 in 10 to the power of 120. That's not just unlikely, that's not just rare. That's mathematically indistinguishable from impossible. Unless we've been living inside a contradiction our entire lives. On one side, physics tells us the Big Bang was meaningless. Just energy, just probability, just matter colliding in a cold, unconscious void. On the other side, something inside you, call it intuition, call it awareness, call it soul, knows that you matter. That this moment matters, that existence itself feels intentional. And most people spend their whole lives suspended between these two stories. Science says accident, inner knowing says significance. And they never realize there's a third possibility, a third answer hiding in plain sight. What if modern physics has quietly uncovered evidence that you, yes, you specifically, might be cosmically necessary? Not metaphorically, not poetically, not spiritually. Literally necessary for the universe to exist the way it does. I'm going to walk you through 6 clues, 6 pieces of a puzzle scientists have been uncovering for decades, but rarely connecting. Because the moment you connect them, the implications are staggering. By the end of this, you'll understand why the universe had to be fine-tuned with impossible precision. Why you are made of ancient stars, and why the greatest unsolved mystery in physics may require consciousness, your consciousness, to resolve it. So here's the question. Are you ready to see how deep this goes? Because once you see it, you don't get to unsee it. Let's go back. 14 billion years ago, before galaxies, before atoms. Before space itself had shape or direction. There was nothing. No light, no time, no structure. And then, in an instant too small to measure, everything burst into existence. We call it the Big Bang, but that name barely captures what happened, because what followed was not just dramatic, it was absurdly precise. Within the first trillionth of a second, the universe experienced something called inflation. It expanded from smaller than a single atom to roughly the size of a grapefruit, not over millions of years, but in less than the blink of an eye. And during that infinitesimal moment, the conditions had to be calibrated with staggering exactness. If you altered those initial parameters by even 1 part in 10 to the 120th, the universe would have either collapsed back into itself instantly, or expanded so violently and so quickly that no structure could ever form. No galaxies, no stars, no planets, no chemistry. No, you, physicist Roger Penrose, calculated the odds of the universe beginning in the low entropy state required for life. 1 in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. To put that into perspective, the total number of atoms in the observable universe is about 10 to the 80. The number we're talking about contains more zeros than there are atoms in existence. At some point, the word unlikely stops having meaning, but it gets even stranger. Within the first second after the Big Bang, protons and neutrons formed, and the forces governing them had to be exact. The strong nuclear force, the force that binds atomic nuclei together, must be precisely the strength it is. If it were just 2% stronger, every hydrogen atom would have fused into heavier elements immediately. No hydrogen means no water. No water means no life. If it were 5% weaker, fusion beyond hydrogen would be impossible. No carbon, no oxygen, no complex chemistry. Then there's electromagnetism, the force governing charged particles. If it varied slightly, electrons wouldn't orbit nuclei correctly. Chemistry would collapse. Molecules wouldn't form. We wouldn't just be dead. We would be impossible. This is what physicists call fine-tuning. And it's not one constant. It's dozens, the cosmological constant, the ratio between electromagnetic force and gravity. The quantum energy levels that allow carbon to exist, every single one balanced on a razor's edge. Shift any of them slightly and the universe becomes sterile, lifeless, structurally empty. So now we arrive at an uncomfortable place. 1 coincidence, maybe luck, 2. a stretch, but dozens of independent constants, all precisely calibrated for complexity and life. At some point, the question changes. Not how did this happen, but why did this happen? Because either we won the most statistically impossible lottery imaginable, or the structure of reality was set up in a way that makes life not an accident but an outcome. Hold that thought, because the next clue changes everything. Here's something beautiful, something that should make you pause. Your body is made of dead stars, not symbolically, literally. The iron flowing through your blood, the calcium strengthening your bones, the oxygen filling your lungs. None of it existed at the beginning of the universe. The Big Bang produced only the simplest elements: hydrogen, helium, and trace amounts of lithium. That's it. Everything heavier, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, silicon, iron, the elements that build planets and people, had to be forged somewhere else. And that somewhere else was inside massive stars. Stars are nuclear furnaces. In their cores, hydrogen atoms collide under unimaginable pressure and heat, fusing into helium. That fusion releases energy. That energy is what makes stars shine. But when a star exhausts its hydrogen, something extraordinary happens. If the star is massive enough, it doesn't fade quietly. It begins fusing helium into carbon, carbon into oxygen, oxygen into silicon, each stage burning hotter and faster than the last, forging heavier elements layer by layer until the core becomes iron. Iron is a dead end. Fusing iron doesn't release energy. It consumes it, and in that moment, the star loses its ability to support its own weight. The core collapses in less than a second, then rebounds in the most violent explosion the universe produces. A supernova, brighter than an entire galaxy. And in that explosion, during those final catastrophic seconds, elements heavier than iron are created. Gold, silver, uranium. All forged in the heart of a dying star. Then that star tears itself apart, scattering its elements across interstellar space. Those atoms drift for millions of years through vast cosmic clouds of gas and dust. Gravity slowly pulls them together. A new star ignites. Planets form from the debris. And on at least one of those planets, those ancient atoms organize themselves into something unprecedented. Self-aware life. You. The atoms in your hand were once inside a star that died billions of years before our sun existed. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe rearranged. A temporary configuration of ancient matter that can think, feel, question. You are stardust that learned how to look back at the stars. And that is not random. That is extraordinary. The cosmos bent inward and folded itself into a structure that can think, that can feel, that can wonder about its own existence. Pause there for a second, because something extraordinary happened. Matter, which began as formless energy, organized itself over billions of years into nervous systems capable of awe. The universe became aware of itself through biological eyes. But here's what makes this even more profound. That entire process, stars living and dying to forge the elements of life, only works if the laws of physics are exactly what they are. If the strong nuclear force were even slightly different, carbon would never form inside stellar cores. If gravity were weaker, massive stars would never collapse into supernovae. The heavy elements would remain locked inside, never scattered into space. If electromagnetism were altered, chemistry itself would unravel. The entire stellar life cycle that eventually produced you depends on the same razor-edge fine-tuning we talked about earlier. You are not just made of stars. You are made of impossibility stacked on impossibility. Every atom in your body is physical evidence of a universe calibrated with extraordinary precision, not merely to allow matter, not merely to allow stars, but to allow this exact arrangement of carbon, oxygen, and consciousness reading these words right now. And that brings us to the next clue. The one that made scientists pause, the one that made them say, wait, something about this doesn't add up. Let's talk about carbon. Because carbon is where fine-tuning stops being abstract and starts becoming personal. Every living organism on Earth is carbon-based. Your DNA, your proteins, your cells. All of it relies on carbon's unique ability to form long, stable, complex molecular chains. But here's the unsettling part. Carbon in the quantities we observe should not exist. At least not according to straightforward probability. And the fact that it does may be one of the most astonishing coincidences in all of physics. In the 1950s, astronomer Fred Hoyle was wrestling with a problem. He was trying to understand how stars manufacture carbon. The math refused to cooperate. To create carbon inside a star, you need 3 helium nuclei to collide almost simultaneously and fuse together. But think about that. 3 separate particles, moving at immense speeds, colliding at the same moment under the right conditions. The odds are astronomically low. Statistically, there shouldn't be enough carbon in the entire observable universe to build even a single human being, let alone billions. Hoyle realized something was missing. There had to be a special mechanism enhancing the reaction. Something called a resonance, a specific energy level within the carbon nucleus that would dramatically increase the likelihood of the triple helium fusion event. So he did something bold. He predicted the exact energy level this resonance would need to have for carbon to form in sufficient quantities. And when physicists tested it, they found it. At precisely the energy Hoyle calculated, exactly where it needed to be. If that resonance were just 4% higher or 4% lower, carbon production would decrease by a factor of 1,000. No carbon. No complex chemistry. No life. But it doesn't end there. After carbon forms, it has to survive long enough to escape the star before being fused into heavier elements. If oxygen possessed a similar resonance level that made carbon fuse too efficiently, carbon would be immediately converted into oxygen. Again, no carbon accumulation. Again, no life. But oxygen's energy levels are arranged in such a way that this does not happen. The universe threaded the needle at the quantum level twice. 2 separate nuclear resonances, both balanced within impossibly narrow margins, ensuring that carbon-based life remains possible. Fred Hoyle was stunned by what he found. He famously said, "A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a superintellect has monkeyed with physics, as well as chemistry and biology." This was not a mystic speaking. This was a lifelong critic of cosmic design. Even he couldn't ignore what the data implied. Think about the magnitude of this. The quantum energy levels of atomic nuclei, parameters locked in during the earliest moments after the Big Bang, had to be tuned with staggering precision. Not once, multiple times. Across multiple elements, all coordinated to produce the chemical foundation for life. 1 coincidence is chance. 2 coincidences raise eyebrows. 3 coincidences start forming a pattern. And we're not done counting, because a bigger picture is emerging. The universe doesn't merely tolerate life. It appears structured in a way that makes life astonishingly viable. Every constant, every force, every quantum nuance aligned in a manner that permits consciousness to arise, which leads to one of the most uncomfortable questions in science. Is the universe fine-tuned because we are lucky, or is it fine-tuned because our existence was never incidental? Let's go deeper. This is where physics begins to brush against philosophy. Where equations turn into arguments, it's called the anthropic principle. And depending on who you ask, it's either profound or deeply frustrating. The idea is simple. The universe must have properties that allow observers to exist, because if it didn't, we wouldn't be here observing it. At first glance, that sounds obvious, but unpack it. Imagine standing in front of a firing squad. 10 expert marksmen aim directly at your heart. They fire. Every single bullet misses. What do you say? Wow, I'm lucky. Or do you begin to ask, why did they all miss? Because when the odds of survival are absurdly small, luck starts to feel hollow. You begin searching for intention, for structure, for explanation. The universe is like that firing squad, except instead of 10 bullets, we're dealing with dozens of fundamental constants. Each one had to land inside an extraordinarily narrow range. The cosmological constant, the energy density of empty space, is fine-tuned to roughly 1 part in 10 to the 120th. Gravity must be balanced against electromagnetism to within about 1 part in 10 to the 36th. Change these numbers slightly and structure collapses. Stars don't form, galaxies disperse. Chemistry breaks down. The anthropic principle says, of course the universe appears fine-tuned. If it weren't, we wouldn't be here to notice. It's a selection effect. Like asking why Earth is so perfectly suited for life. If it weren't, we'd either be somewhere else or nowhere at all. But here's the difficulty. That explanation only feels satisfying if there are many universes. If reality consists of a vast multiverse, countless cosmic bubbles each with different physical laws, then it's not surprising that at least one happens to support life. We find ourselves in that one by necessity, not because it's special, but because it's habitable. Enter the multiverse hypothesis. Some physicists propose that our universe is just one bubble in an immense cosmic foam. Most universes would be sterile, lifeless, chaotic, but in a few rare pockets the constants align. And naturally, observers emerge only in those rare cases. It sounds elegant, but it carries a price. The multiverse is not testable. We cannot observe these other universes. We cannot measure them. We cannot falsify the claim. In a sense, physics begins leaning into metaphysics, invoking an infinity of unseen realities to explain the precision of the one we inhabit. Some scientists embrace this. Others call it an intellectual escape hatch. But what if there's another possibility? What if fine-tuning is not the result of blind luck? Not the result of infinite unseen universes? What if consciousness itself plays a deeper role? What if observers, beings capable of awareness, are not accidental byproducts of cosmic evolution, but essential components of how the universe operates? What if you are not merely inside the universe, but necessary to it? That's where the next clue takes us. And this is the part physicists are the most hesitant to talk about. This is where it starts to feel mystical. And I don't mean mystical in a vague, incense-burning, poetic sense. I mean mystical in the way where we have hard experimental data, and we genuinely don't know what to do with it. Because when you go deep enough into quantum mechanics, you encounter something deeply unsettling. Consciousness does not appear to be separate from the physical world. It appears entangled with it. In quantum physics, particles do not possess definite properties until they are measured. Before measurement, an electron does not sit neatly in one location. It exists in what's called a superposition, a spread of probabilities, a blur of all possible states at once. Not here or there, but potentially everywhere. Then something strange happens. The moment you measure it, the wave function collapses. The cloud of probabilities resolves into a single definite outcome. The particle chooses a state. And here's the part that makes physicists shift in their chairs. The act of observation, conscious observation, seems to be what triggers that collapse. This is known as the observer effect. And it isn't philosophy. It isn't speculation. It's measurable, repeatable, experimentally verified. Particles behave differently when they are observed than when they are not. It's as if the universe responds to awareness, as if reality waits for a witness. You can interpret that in several ways. You can call the universe shy, you can call it interactive. You can call it strange, but none of those words make it less disturbing. Physicist Andre Lind once posed a question that cuts to the core of this mystery. Is it possible that consciousness and the cosmos are inseparable? That progress in understanding the universe requires progress in understanding consciousness. Think about what that suggests. It suggests the universe is not merely a backdrop against which consciousness accidentally appears. It suggests consciousness might be fundamental, not an afterthought, not a byproduct, but a necessary component. Because without observers, the quantum wave function does not collapse. Reality remains a haze of possibility, potential, undefined, not actual. Here's the radical implication. What if the fine-tuning of the universe is not merely about permitting life to arise? What if it's about permitting consciousness to arise? Because consciousness is what transforms possibility into actuality. Not real in the sense of existing somewhere abstractly, but real in the sense of being actualized, chosen from infinite potential into definite form. If that's true, then you are not a cosmic accident. You are a quantum requirement. The universe required observers to become concrete. And your awareness, the specific awareness reading these words right now, is participating in that process. You are the universe collapsing its own wave function. You are reality selecting itself from a field of infinite potential. I know that sounds like it's drifting into the territory of mysticism. But consider this. Stephen Hawking once asked, what is it that breathes fire into the equations and makes a universe for them to describe? A theory of everything could provide flawless equations. Elegant mathematics, perfect symmetry. But equations alone do not generate galaxies. Symbols do not ignite stars. Numbers do not assemble atoms. Something animates them. Something gives them substance. And if consciousness is fundamental, if awareness is the fire that turns abstract mathematics into lived existence, then the universe is not merely fine-tuned for life in general. It is fine-tuned for observers, for perspective. For you, let's widen the lens. Physicists have long pursued a theory of everything. One unified equation capable of describing gravity, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force within a single coherent framework. The dream is elegance, unity, a final chalkboard moment where someone writes the equation and says, "This explains it all." We're not there yet, but serious attempts exist. String theory proposes that the fundamental building blocks of reality are vibrating strings. Loop quantum gravity attempts to quantize spacetime itself. Brilliant minds are working on this. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Even if we discovered that ultimate equation, even if we unified all forces into one beautiful mathematical expression, we would still face the deepest question. Why does anything exist at all? An equation describes. It does not create, it maps relationships. It does not breathe. It does not ignite. It does not choose. The quantum enigma, the mystery of the observer, cannot be solved by mathematics alone. It involves decision, selection, awareness. Unless consciousness is included in our model of reality, we are building a map without territory, a musical score without sound, perfectly structured, completely lifeless. Now connect the clues. The Big Bang began under impossibly fine-tuned conditions. The elements in your body were forged in dying stars. Carbon exists because of quantum resonances that should not statistically align. The anthropic principle tells us the universe must permit observers. Quantum mechanics tells us observation collapses possibility into actuality. And a theory of everything cannot explain existence unless consciousness is part of the equation. Put all of that together, and something radical emerges. You are not a cosmic accident. You are a cosmic necessity. The universe did not randomly eject you from chaos. It arranged itself precisely, delicately, improbably, so that you could exist. Not humanity in the abstract, you. The specific configuration of awareness experiencing this moment. Without observers, the universe remains a cloud of probability. With observers, it becomes definite, concrete, actual. This overturns the narrative we've been handed. We were told we are insignificant, tiny biological accidents floating in an indifferent void. But the data tells a different story. The data shows a universe exquisitely sensitive to initial conditions, fine-tuned beyond reasonable chance, and incomplete without conscious participation. You are not merely inside the universe. You are the universe knowing itself, observing itself, actualizing itself. And here's the paradox that reconciles everything. Free will and cosmic design are not opposites. In a quantum universe, reality is not rigidly predetermined. It exists as a spectrum of potential. And consciousness, your consciousness, is the mechanism through which potential becomes actual. You are not a puppet in a mechanical script. You are an observer participating in the collapse of possibility, choosing which branch of reality manifests, not separate from the cosmos. Inseparable from it. This is why that feeling arises when you look at the night sky, that quiet sense of being chosen. Because at a level deeper than thought, deeper than language, something in you recognizes the pattern. You are not here by accident. The universe required observers. It required awareness. It required you. You are the response to Hawking's question. You are the fire in the equations, the awareness that turns possibility into existence. The fine-tuning was not random noise. It was the stage being set for the universe to awaken through conscious experience. Now bring it even closer. Your DNA, the exact sequence of base pairs that defines you, carries odds that echo the improbability of the universe itself. 1 in 10 raised to an almost inconceivable power. If your parents had conceived even a moment earlier or later a different sperm, a different egg, a different genetic combination, someone would exist, but not you. Your existence is a layered improbability. First, the universe had to be fine-tuned. Then stars had to live and die. Then carbon had to form against the odds. Then Earth had to stabilize. Then life had to evolve. Then your lineage had to survive. And then, at precisely the right moment, you had to come into being, a double miracle. A cosmic calibration followed by a biological precision. The universe had to be fine-tuned. And then time itself had to conspire so that you could arrive exactly when you did. And then, inside that already fine-tuned universe, a trillion biological coincidences had to line up with impossible precision. Evolution had to navigate extinction after extinction. Your ancestors had to survive famine, war, disease, and randomness stretching back through unbroken generations. Cells had to replicate without catastrophic error. DNA had to encode and preserve information across billions of years. You are improbability layered upon improbability, but here is what I need you to truly hear. You are not merely a byproduct of a finely calibrated cosmos. You are its expression. Consciousness emerging from matter is not a glitch in the system. It is the system reaching its intended capacity. You are the universe experiencing itself, knowing itself, loving itself. When you watch a sunset and feel something move inside you, that is not just a human reaction. That is the cosmos perceiving beauty through your nervous system. When you feel awe beneath a sky full of stars, that is the universe marveling at its own immensity through your awareness. You have felt this before. Maybe you didn't have the language, maybe you dismissed it. But you have stood under the night sky and sensed connection, something vast, something intimate at the same time. That was not delusion. That was recognition. You are not separate from reality. You are woven into its deepest fabric. At the quantum level, the observer and the observed are inseparable aspects of one process. So every time you doubted your significance, every time you felt small in an indifferent universe, every time someone told you that you are just an accident of chemistry, that was the misunderstanding. The evidence says otherwise. The truth is embedded in the constants of physics, in the resonance that allows carbon to exist, in the collapse of the wave function. You are necessary, you are integral. You are the universe becoming conscious, and that reframes everything. So let's return to the original tension. Is the universe random, or is it designed? The answer is both and neither. Because those categories are too small. Randomness suggests chaos without structure. Design suggests a designer separate from what is designed. But what we see is something more subtle. Self-organization, a feedback loop between potential and awareness. The cosmos tuning itself through the emergence of consciousness. Think of a seed. A seed carries the blueprint of a tree within it. But that blueprint alone is not enough. The tree requires soil, water, sunlight. Environment shapes the tree. And the tree, in turn, reshapes the environment, altering soil composition, influencing ecosystems, changing the air. They co-create one another. The universe operates similarly. The laws of physics are the blueprint. Consciousness is the gardener. Reality is the living structure that grows through their interaction, which means something profound. You possess agency. Not the illusion of choice inside a mechanical clockwork, but participatory influence within a quantum field. Every observation you make, every decision you enact, every shift in awareness. You are participating in the collapse of possibility into actuality. You are not steering the cosmos alone. You are not omnipotent, but you are not irrelevant. You are a co-creator. And this is why fine-tuning matters. The universe had to be exquisitely calibrated to allow stable stars, to allow complex chemistry, to allow planetary systems, to allow nervous systems capable of awareness. If even one constant were significantly off, the feedback loop fails. No observers, no collapse of probability, no actualized experience. Just elegant mathematics suspended in abstraction. The universe tuned itself so that it could wake up, and you are that awakening in motion. The paradox dissolves here. Random potential and intentional awareness are not enemies. They are complementary forces. The quantum field provides infinite possibility. Consciousness focuses that possibility. Together, they weave what we call reality. And you right now are engaged in that process. You always have been. You simply did not realize the magnitude of it. So what do you do with this understanding? How do you live knowing that you are a quantum observer participating in reality's unfolding? Here is the shift. Stop imagining yourself as separate from the world. You are not outside the universe, analyzing it from a distance. You are the universe examining itself from within. That means your attention carries weight. Your focus carries influence. Your state of consciousness shapes outcomes. This is not empty philosophy. Quantum experiments demonstrate that observation alters results. What you attend to becomes defined. What you ignore remains diffuse, not in a simplistic wish it and it appears sense. But in a literal, measurable way, consciousness influences probability distributions. You are constantly selecting from possibility, moment by moment. If the cosmos is fine-tuned for observers, if consciousness is central rather than accidental, then your role becomes clear. Pay attention, be present, observe with depth. Because the quality of your awareness affects the version of reality that crystallizes around you. This is the practical implication of everything we've explored. You are not passive. You are participatory. Reality is not something happening to you. It is something happening through you, and perhaps something responding to you. Now consider something even more provocative. What if observation does not only influence the present moment? What if it reaches backward? What if causality itself is not as rigid as we assume? There are interpretations of quantum mechanics that suggest the future measurement can influence past states, that the act of observation reverberates across time. If that is true, then consciousness is not merely embedded in reality. It is threaded through its temporal structure, but that is a doorway we will open next. Before we close, pause and notice what you are feeling. Awe, confusion, recognition, discomfort, whatever it is, it matters, because this conversation is not abstract, it is experiential. It is about you recognizing your place in a cosmos that is far more intimate than you were told. You are not an accident. You are not insignificant. You are stardust that learned to think. A quantum observer collapsing infinite potential into lived experience. The universe is not indifferent to you. It is you, experiencing, knowing, loving. The cosmos is watching itself through your eyes, listening through your ears, thinking through your mind, and that makes you cosmically necessary. This is not ego, it is participation. It is responsibility, it is wonder, and once you see it, you cannot return to the old story of insignificance. You are the awakening point of a 14 billion year process. The moment where matter becomes meaning, the place where equations become experience, the fire that breathes life into form. And this is only the beginning. Because if consciousness is this fundamental, if observation is this powerful, then the next layer of the mystery goes even deeper. We'll explore that next. Until then, remember this: you are not in the universe. You are the universe becoming aware of itself right here, right now.